Hello everyone, welcome. So today I'm going to be touching upon what happens if you've got your Mercury in the 12th house in your birth chart. Now, Mercury symbolizes a lot of things to do with your mind, your thoughts, and just about how the thought structure occurs within your psychology. And the 12th house deals with consciousness, deals with your sacred private space inside of your consciousness where, yeah, not everyone has access to. So now what happens when your mind or your ability to think and process information or your ability to be rational enters into the realm of the unknown, enters the realm of the subconscious, enters the realm of consciousness itself. How does it affect the way you communicate? How does it affect the way you think? How does it affect the way you even process information that you receive from the society around you? So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And yeah, after this, in the next video, I'll be getting into what happens if Mercury is placed in a certain sign in your 12th house. But I'll keep that for the next as it'll get really long. So, before getting into Mercury in the mind and the metaphysical symbolism of Mercury, I would rather touch upon the physical, astronomical facts about it so that it gets a little bit easier to join the dots between the physical and the metaphysical. Now, Mercury being the first planet, that is the closest planet to the sun, moves at an extraordinary speed. It moves at speeds of up to like 47 kilometers per second. So, because of the speed at which Mercury is moving, it's also just taking 88 Earth days to complete one full cycle. Like what you have as an Earth year, 365 days. On Mercury just takes 88 days. Now accentuating on the fact of speed. Okay. Now, as you have on Earth, right, you have like the sun rises in the morning and it sets in the evening. On Mercury, it's very, very different. It rises and sets at different points of time during the whole day, during the whole mercurial day. So what and why this happens is mainly because of a elliptical orbit that Mercury has. Now, with Mercury's elliptical orbit, with it, it's more like an X shape actually. Yeah, like X-shaped elliptical orbit. So it's kind of moving up and down, like it's moving at a diagonal trajectory, up and down. So the sun rises, sets, and this happens multiple times during the day. Now, why this becomes really important when we are talking about displacement is that you understand how the movement is judged. Because if you are judging a planet's orbit and it's able to do this several times during a day, that is set and rise, set and rise, set and rise, set and rise, it is obviously not a stable foundation of judgment. And as probably all of us are familiar, that our thoughts, which browse through our mind several times a day, are not exactly the most stable form of judgment to base our actions upon. Because, as they call it, the monkey mind, it just keeps jumping around, right? And a lot of it has to do with the orbit of Mercury, the nature of it. Now that we kind of get an idea about the facts, about the physical facts of it, that it's a fast moving planet, it's got an elliptical orbit, which means it's going topsy turvy. many times a day, and that it's rising and setting many times a day. Now, this becomes really important, especially in this placement. Why? Because rising and setting means it's kind of going in to the nature of your mood swings itself. Even though that is ruled by the moon, the mind is very interlinked to our emotions. And so is Mercury very interlinked to the moon. And being able to go topsy turvy multiple times a day means that a certain thought or a certain idea that you are going to be basing your decision, your life decisions, your big decisions on is going to change several times a day. Now, how trustworthy is that? Like, how trustworthy is it to base some important life decision based on an idea that you had in the morning, which was bright because it's the sun rose out there in Mercury, and the sunset in Mercury again, it's gotten a bit gloomy, the idea. Then you saw something positive about the idea, then it went down again. Then you again saw something positive about the idea, and it went down again. Now, if you are basing your decisions off of this, it's not the most stable way to go about things. That's why, I mean, you say that you don't follow everything that the mind says. You need to start to get some distance from it and be able to watch it. And that is 101 meditation, like meditation 101, the number one thing that you kind of do, that is distance yourself from your Mercury. Now, why do you distance yourself from Mercury during meditation? Because it's the closest planet to the sun, your vitality, your soul. It's the closest planet, so it's the most difficult one to see. It's just so close to you that you are not able to get enough distance to watch its movement, and it's just too close to you to be able to observe. So if you yourself are moving, it's very, very, very difficult to get a hang of your mind. So hence, yeah, meditation 101, stillness leads to being able to catch your Mercury, or at least be aware of the sunsets and the sunrises about happening on Mercury, basically. So if you are going to be looking at yourself as the sun and Mercury as your thoughts, one of the first things that we need to see is that Mercury and mind are the same thing. Thoughts and polarity are the same thing. Polarity, negative and positive. And you can say that the movement that arises out of this polarity sometimes leads to bouncing back of ideas and creating something new, while at other times it just leads to confusion, because that's true. Yeah, that's just the nature of polarity. Now, when you are dealing with a planet like this, now I think I've given enough uh, ideas about how Mercury is. Now, when you're dealing with a planet like this and it enters into your 12th house, the house of your spirit. 12th house is the house where all the other 11 houses of your astrological chart kind of unwind and come into a place of de-manifestation. Houses number 1 to 11 are when the houses actually manifest in the physical realm. House number 12 is when they just de-manifest and kind of let go. So in this realm, in the realm of the 12th house, movement in general, even if you do not have Mercury here, movement in general is not polarity based, which means it does not go from left to right, or from positive to negative, or from sunset to sunrise. That does not happen in the 12th house. Movement does not happen that way. Movement happens that way in other houses. Say, for example, the 3rd house, which is ruled by Mercury itself. Maybe the 6th house, which is also ruled by Mercury. The 9th house as well, which is ruled by Jupiter. In the 12th house, the so-called polarization of movement to create a new life does not happen. See, when you are in a physical plane, duality is a must for life to kind of go on. You have masculine and you have the feminine. You have the negative and then you have the positive. You have the hero and then you have the villain. All of these characters or all of these energies are necessary for a compelling story to occur in your life or on the planet, to keep it engaging and to keep it moving ahead, to constantly evolving. You're constantly seeing this tug of war between light and darkness. Again, two different poles. So, this is kind of the blueprint of movement within house number 1 to 11. But it's not necessarily the case in house number 12. House number 12 is not even about life to a large extent. I would go on a limb and say that. Now, what do I mean by it's not even about life? By that I mean it's not exactly about wanting to go ahead. Because when you speak about the very nature of life itself and evolution itself, it's a compelling movement forward. Catching up with this leads to what one would call as the feeling of having to survive or having to catch up or perish. So all of these concepts are or feelings are relevant between house number 1 and 11 because they deal with the living. They deal with, yeah, as I said, life itself, life on earth itself, life in its manifested form. Now, when you enter the 12th house, you're talking about life, but also not necessarily life. Now, on a more polarized opinion, the opposite of life is seen as death. That is lack of movement. Again, what does lack of movement mean? Lack of polarized movement, of going from negative to positive, negative to positive. The dead just stop to do that, or the dead just do not engage in that activity anymore. So we call it as being non-living, or that life, the polarization of life is not flowing through it anymore. That entity is not participating in activities of house number 1 to 11. So we call a body which is not breathing anymore, again, polarization. What does breathing mean? Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, you're consuming. Breathing out, you're giving back. So the so-called dead body is not participating in this polarization anymore, is not participating in this give and take anymore, is not participating with the plants anymore in terms of like, yeah, you take in oxygen and yeah, you give it back and you are, with the plants in a certain cycle which works on the planet. You're not in this give and take anymore. So you're not in house number 1 to 11 anymore. So now what exactly is the 12th house? If it's not about life, it's not actually about death as well. The 12th house is not exactly about death. It is about creative conglomeration of life and death together itself. Now, what does that exactly even mean? It means that you take life as a polarization and death as the opposite of polarization, that is stillness. Now, when you mix stillness and polarization or activity, And when you bring them together within a certain space, and you're able to watch that at that time, that means you, the watcher, is outside of both, is outside of the stillness and outside of the activity. Now, this is primarily the realm of the 12th house. It's the realm of the watcher. It's the realm of awareness. It's the realm of what you would call as God consciousness. It's the realm where awareness creates a new mixture of the two elements that it has, that is, the living and the still, or the non living, or the dead. By mixing these two, comes up with a completely new version of the living and the dead together. So it comes up with a new cycle of what activity looks like and what rest looks like. So now, when you put Mercury, the planet which pretty much denotes polarization, the planet which pretty much denotes movement from left to right, or from negative to positive, from male to female. That's why Mercury rules Gemini. Gemini is all about dual. It's all about duality. In music, Gemini is about counterpoints. Counterpoints are when two melodies are bouncing off each other and are independent of each other, but are playing with each other in a way that they are in polarization with each other. Bach, who is the master of counterpoints, is a good example if you'd like to hear what it means. So, Mercury rules all these things, rules all these signs. So, when Mercury goes into your 12th house, what it's kind of doing is this very movement of bouncing back left and right, the orbit on Mercury again, sun setting, sun rising, sun setting, sun rising, sun setting, sun rising, happening multiple times a day. All of this enters in to a realm where movement is not based on this axis at all. All of this enters into a realm where movement is just not about going back and forth. So then, how does one move? How does your Mercury move here? How does your mind move here if you have Mercury in the 12th? How are your thoughts going to get formulated? How are you going to communicate with someone if you have a Mercury like this? And this is one of the biggest problems of having this placement, is that you cannot communicate with anybody outside of you in a rational way. You cannot communicate with anybody in a way that relates to the polarization of thought itself. You are unable to formulate thoughts in a positive and negative polarization, which is the backbone of earthly communications. And by being unable to do that, you are having to trust or put your eggs in a basket which is very much in touch with God consciousness itself, which is very much in touch with awareness itself, which is very much in touch with the very creative nature of the universe itself. When you put your Mercury into such a space, it is going to be moving in a way that it amalgamates the living and the dead, that it amalgamates sound and silence, that it amalgamates any form of activity and inactivity, mixes them, comes up with something completely new. Now, when you're talking about such a kind of Mercury, you are also talking about being monosyllable in nature. Now, why do I say monosyllable in nature and give emphasis on the word mono? I say that as when you have creativity, when you have any universe which is just forming, any constellation which is just on the rise, you first see a singular light, as is probably even written in a lot of holy scriptures, that first there was light, right? First there was light, and that light was always singular. Now, I could bring that to an earthly context and say that if you are a business owner and you're a startup, there might be a time in the future when this company would be a multinational company, when this company might be a corporation in which thousands of people work. But in the beginning, when it was forming, it was formulated by probably one person in the idea space. So when it is being formed, it is being formed in a mono way, is that the person's coming up with the idea for the company or the universe or his creation, his or her creation, is propagating that out into the world, looking for maybe investors or somebody else to collaborate with. And when that happens, he or she is able to slowly branch this company and develop it. But in the beginning, this person, who's the originator of the company, is a mono entity, is a single entity. It's the same with this Mercury out here. From house number 1 to 11, Mercury is a dual entity. That is, it has the support of life itself, the polarization of life going from left to right, negative to positive. As I described that on the orbit, Mercury has an elliptical orbit, an X-shaped orbit. So it has multiple sunsets and sunrises throughout the day. So it keeps going, seesaw, seesaw. House number 1 to 11, that's exactly what it would do if you had Mercury in any of the houses other than the 12th. But in the 12th, it is unable to do this. So people are unable to relate to you in a what you would call as a normal way. Because most of the times, unless they're extremely deep conversations, it's kind of based on bouncing back of ideas. Or in a lot of times, it's about just saying, do you believe or do you not believe? Do you agree or do you not agree? Is the answer yes or is the answer no? Should I take a left or should I take a right? Should I make this choice or should I not? Now, while this is seen as common sense, like extremely trivial and basic questions, a 12th house Mercury person is unable to answer them. Because a 12th house Mercury person's mind is not in this realm at all. A 12th house Mercury person's mind is not in polarization at all. A 12th house Mercury person's mind is in a realm of awareness, is in a realm where polarization and silence are together the constructing factors of creating a monosyllable which can either act as a spell or a promise or an oath or an extremely potent decision to take action. So, this monosyllabic words that this person utters or formulates, I wouldn't even say utter, formulates, because the formation happens in this way, not in left and right. And this person with Mercury in the 12th formulates a word, formulates an idea. It is generally mono in nature, which means it is extremely dense in nature. This is the realm of a spellcaster. If you have Mercury in Scorpio, say in the 12th house, now I will go into detail in the next video because it'll get very long out if I do that. But spells are all about dense things. You don't write spells which are 500 pages long. You write spells which are at the max a sentence long or two, sometimes even less. Sometimes just 2 to 3 words, sometimes just one word. And this spell has so much power in it, has so much information fed into those few characters. I wouldn't even say words because it could just be one word. That's why I say characters, means alphabets. So it has so much potential potency inside of this one, a few characters, that it is able to cut through the shaft of the other words and able to bring itself into life and birth itself in reality. The same goes for a promise. A deep felt promise done by a person with Mercury in the 12th house would act out exactly that way. Because the promise would be felt out very deeply and would come out in a few words. Now, these words would result in a reality that this person creates, which is aligned with his or her promise. The same with the oath. When a Mercury in the 12th house person takes an oath, he or she potentially has the ability to word out that oath in such specificity that it comes off as being potent enough that the other planets inside of the psyche, that is the sun, the moon, and the Mars, start to work in collaboration to make it happen. Now, anything which comes out in grave detail from the mouth of a 12th house Mercury person has all of these possibilities. Now, how do these possibilities manifest themselves? Because Mercury alone cannot do that. Because Mercury just deals with communication, doesn't deal with other things. So, for instance, we're talking about the spell or the oath or the promise. How this actually works is this 12th house Mercury, as I said, devoid of polarization, formulates a monosyllabic spell, promise, or an oath and sets it out into the realm of reality. Now, why is it able to set it out directly into reality? It's because it is devoid or beyond life and death itself. So it is able to so-called penetrate, inject, or directly enter into life on earth from a realm beyond the existing life on earth. That is houses number 1 to 11. So it's able to just inject into reality. So it's able to just penetrate reality. So when you're talking about, say, a promise or an oath, life is already happening for this so-called person, right? It's already moving. Now, when a Mercury in the 12th house person takes an oath, a spell, or a promise, they're actually injecting it into their current reality. And they're injecting it from a realm which is beyond reality. So they have all the possibilities of going ahead and changing their reality just with the power of the word. Because this word is the first word. It's the word of God. It's the monosyllabic word. It is the potent word. It is the word which is filled with the possibility of becoming an entire corporation, an entire universe, an entire constellation. And it is being uttered within a few characters. Now, how does this go ahead and manifest? Goes ahead and manifests with the help of your sun, which is your vitality, which is your soul, which is your ability to look at this oath, as I again described that Mercury is the closest to the sun. So if this Mercury has taken this oath on such a deep level, on such a penetrative level, the sun is able to get distance from this Mercury and is now able to see its own oath, is now able to see its own spell, is now able to see its own promise, and is now able to tell itself that I'm going to stand by it. That the soul takes a soul decision that I'm going to stand by it, no matter what. And as soon as the sun says this, your moon combines in the act. The moon comes in, and the moon, which rules your emotion, creates an emotional density around this decision. It creates an emotional vitality around this decision. It creates an emotional stance around this decision. And this is especially true if you have your moon in Cancer, and probably 100% true if you have your moon in Scorpio. That is the placement for oaths and spells and promises. That is literally the placement to have it with. So it's relevant for other moons as well, but less so for, say, a Gemini moon, less so for a Libra moon as well, probably. But Aries moon, Scorpio moon, Cancer moon, these are extremely potent ones. Even Taurus moon, because moon gets exalted there, stabilizes in decision making. Even Capricorn moon, even though it's debilitated, but it's a stable formation. Aquarius moon, probably, but 50-50. So it would again depend on, what your moon sign is. It would largely depend on what your moon sign is, because we are human beings, but more so we are emotional beings. And if you do not have a very strong moon supporting this oath or this promise or this spell, it might not actually happen. It might not. It probably, yeah, you can say that the founder of the company is great, has a great vision, but it's just that he does not have the team to make it happen. And the moon really is, you just need the moon on your team if you want to make that happen. So with a weak moon, I don't want to say weak, I would say non-accommodating moon. like a moon in Gemini or something, this might get a little bit, I would say, irrelevant to you, because this is not the nature it would take if that was the case. However, if you have moon in Gemini and your Mercury in Cancer in the 12th, this will still work because of mutual displacement, because both are in each other's houses. Yeah, the moon goes to Gemini and the Mercury goes to Cancer. They're mutually displacing each other, so this would work. I'll get into detail when I get into the planets and the houses, but yeah, once this decision is so-called made by the 12th house Mercury person, he or she needs the support of the sun, a strong, vital sun, the soul, for it to know that this is a decision I stand by. Second, it needs a very powerful moon to put an emotional flag and say that I'm not moving away from this oath. I'm not moving away from this promise. I am going to stick by it. And after that, it needs a fairly decent Mars. Even a weak Mars, I feel you can get away with, because Mars comes last in this chain. Sun comes first, the moon comes second, the Mars comes last in this chain. Mars is your action, the ability to go ahead and do this. A strong Mars would be obviously much more conducive, but a weak Mars also has ways of doing it. It might have covert ways of doing it, but it still has ways of doing it. So I wouldn't completely count it out. So any decision made by this 12th house Mercury person would go through the filters of the sun, the moon, and Mars to see how that decision comes through. Now, this is a more purest way of looking at this placement. If you are probably not feeling any of the condensed things which I'm speaking about, it could be that the Mercury is in a more muted position, which means it's in a more muted standpoint, that it has not developed that level of awareness that it goes ahead and formulates. Yeah, it's not gone ahead and developed that level of clarity to be able to come up with a creative spell or a promise or an oath, or it has not gone through that level of you would say trials and tribulations for it to be even necessary to come up with something that pragmatic. So if the first part does not really ring a bell in you, it's probably that your Mercury is a little bit more muted. The other manifestation of this placement is the person feels quite muted, feels at times also having a lack of opinion, especially if it goes into Pisces. Might feel a lack of opinion, might feel a lack of need to say something, might feel a lack of need to contribute to a conversation because there doesn't seem to be much to talk about. Silence has its own beauty, and this person seems to pretty much enjoy that. So if it's not the first part, could well be the second. But if it is the second, always know that the first part is your potential, and do not miss out on that by just looking at this as a handicap. It is not. It is a gift. It is not a handicap. So if you are looking at it as a handicap, please do not do that, and know that it has a lot of potential. The Mercury has a lot of potential in the 12th house. It's just that it behaves differently from those around you, who probably have Mercury's going from houses number 1 to 11, and their orbits are different. While your orbit is very different. It's not even an orbit. It's creative dismantling and jutting out or spitting out of a monosyllabic promise, oath, or spell. So that is kind of what it's all about. And in the next video, I'm going to go through Mercury in the 12th house, but with all different houses. What happens when Mercury is in your 12th house and it's in the sign of Aries? That means you would most likely have a Taurus ascendant. That way, just one after the other, after the other, after the other, through all the signs. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this video, go check out what I do on my website, which is linked below. I am a music composer. That's kind of what I'm here on earth for. Astrology is something I do because it's given me so much, and I would always do that. And yeah, I also partake in a high ticket offer, which allows me to support my music. And I do offer an astrological career consultation along with my high ticket sales business. So if you are looking to make the shift, if you are looking to go follow your dreams, if you are in that kind of space where you are going from one part of your life into the other, you're making a transition, then I have the exact reading for you. So if you are in that space, you can go down, book a call with me, or just write me on my website, and you can take it ahead from there. Other than that, I will see you in the next episode. Till then, I hope you stay well, healthy, and if you're Mercury in the 12th house, I hope you do not look at yourself as being handicapped. That's all I have to say for today. Bye.